Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now there's no doubt that there is an explosion of e-bike companies in the market these days. All the time, left and right, you see advertisements, you see social media. There are just a ton of companies out there. Today we're going to look at an offering from Nakto. Now, Nakto reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in looking at one of their mountain bikes. This here, an e-bike, a hardtail mountain bike, fully in the box, and I can tell you it was just a feat to get this down here for this unboxing. Definitely got some weight, hopefully a good and beefy and robust design. But today what we're going to do, the unboxing, we'll talk about the features, and then in a future video we'll do all the riding footage. We'll test it in the urban environment, we'll test it in the off-road environment, and we'll see if this Nakto F6 hardtail e-bike mountain bike can handle it. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Nakto who did provide this for review. Now with so many e-bike companies coming onto the scene, it's really hard to tell just by looking at a website what's going to be a good bike and what's just going to be okay. There are so many of them that hover around that same sort of price point, and they all seem to have similar features, but I can tell you that it's the combination of components and how it's ultimately made that can make or break that rider's experience. To date, I've really only tested more of the folding and compact, call it 20-inch rim fat tire bikes, but today a full-size mountain bike. Now again, this is the F6, so Nakto F6, which has a 1,000 watt peak hub, and that is about right. It's nice when you get up to that 1,000 mark for the peak wattage. That gives you enough push, enough punch, and can get the bike up to speed. This is going to be a little bit heavy, but hopefully it's got enough oomph to get us going. So with that, let's bust this out of the box. We'll do the unboxing, we'll look at the features, and then in the future video, we'll get out for some riding. Now this is not light. The entire box with the packaging, 96 pounds. So 96 pounds, I mean, that's getting fairly hefty. But at least the good news is everything seems to be well packaged. And it should be mostly assembled at this point. Taking a look at this, you can see everything nicely packaged, nicely protected. Seems to have the appropriate protection where you need it, so nothing getting damaged while it's in transit. Right away you can see 4-inch fat tires, nice fender design. It's actually like a matte black, so sort of that matte finish. This is gonna be a good looking bike. So getting it out of here is definitely going to be a little bit awkward, especially if you're going to try to preserve the box, just in case you had, warranty issues or something like that. So I'm going to take my time here, kind of dig this thing out as carefully as I can and try to save my box while I'm at this. So you can see pretty easy to get that front rim out of there, as long as you're careful. Here we have our pedals and the front skewer. After a little bit of wrestling, that went okay, but you also have your seat, and there were just a couple of caps. So keep everything protected. So far, a little bit of wrestling, but it's going all right. I did find a couple of cut zip ties and this screw. So what exactly does this go to? I just got to be careful. Probably should become fairly evident at some point, but in the meantime, loose screw in the bottom of the box. So there's a good amount of packaging that you need to work your way through. Knife might do it. I would suggest a good pair of pliers might help, just to avoid accidentally cutting something, but we'll see how we do with the knife. I am going to attempt it this way. These are good heavy zip ties, so it might take just a little bit of effort, but I'm going to finish unboxing this, getting all the packaging off, and we'll go from there. And so you do have a full user's manual, which here you can see does cover pretty much everything you are going to need. As I look a little further, not necessarily indicating right away that this has the installation instructions, more sort of like a use manual, so the user's manual. In here, this is your power supply, so full power supply. Here we have our pedals, so actually seemingly fairly nice pedals. Couple of little screws, so you do need to be careful. Gonna have to figure out what these little collars are. And then a tool bag. So now with everything pretty well unwrapped, ready to go. Now I can see already some things that I like, and I can see some things that I don't like, and I see one thing that, if we're not careful, I think is a bit of a liability, but I'll save that till we get to it. As we move forward here, I'm basically going to approach this a fairly simple way. For me, this is nice and sturdy here. It's standing upright, no problem. There are probably truly installation instructions that I should follow. However, what I can tell you is right away, it's going to be super easy for me just to get these bars up and into place and out of my way. So I'm opting to do that first. And so the start of this will be, oh, look at that, spare fuse. But here, let's get this nut off the top. This can go away, that's trash. And you can select the height of your bars. Now for me, I'm probably going to go almost all the way up, but I'm going to take one of these spacers out. Get my bars into place. Now make sure that you don't get everything all tangled up. I'm going to get these into place. And for me, I'm probably going to go down one more. I just want one spacer on top here, which that'll do. And then taking your nut, putting that back on top. Now I'm not going to tighten all of this down just yet. Not until I get everything perfectly into place. So I'm just going to get that close and roughly center these bars. Taking my larger Allen wrench here. I'm going to tighten down on the sides of the stem. And just getting everything established. Again, I'm not tightening everything down just yet, but this gets the bars at least out of the way. This here is a nice oversized light, and that thing is just super beefy. So that, I believe, is going to go right on the front, but I feel like I want to get my tire in place next. Which for the axle, I absolutely recommend putting a little bit of grease. This will get wet. It will go, pretty much, and I'm not going to say underwater, but it certainly might. You're definitely going to get this wet, so put some grease. I will probably run my quick release lever, I would say on the opposite side of my brakes and on the opposite side of the rotor. Do not touch the rotor with greasy fingers or oily fingers. The grease can make its way into the pores of the metal, and that will definitely decrease your braking capabilities, and at least at minimum it will squeak and squeal and drive you crazy. But at this point now, with my quick release skewer in place, I can get my tire up. It will really only go the one way because I'm going to fit my caliper for my brakes over the rotor. Shouldn't be terribly difficult, and this should sit down fairly well. You might need to pull the forks apart just a little bit to buy some clearance, but it will go. So that's just a matter of being patient. Might be easier with two people. But now tightening down on the quick release skewer. That feels pretty good. So with the bike now upright, I'm going to start focusing on getting my bars nice and tight and in alignment. So trying to make sure that everything's good and square, seated down and nice and tight. You're not going to over tighten the cap on the top, but you definitely need that to be nice and firm. And once you have that tightened up, you can get on the sides. Just make sure you keep everything nice and aligned. Alternate a little bit, keep the torque nice and even on these bolts so that it squashes down on an equal rate, top and bottom. And you can see here, I'm not going to over tighten, but definitely going firm until the tool just wants to kind of stop moving here. Right about there for now. Working now to get the computer properly oriented. Again, just be careful to get everything oriented the right direction. I believe this is going to be correct, but without the screen illuminated at this point, it's possible I have this upside down, but I believe this would be the right way. So the wires coming out of the top nice and smooth. They're not twisted, they're not binding, they're not pinching. And those small little screws that we had now go to hold the computer in place. And these do use the smallest hex key, which again, none of this is getting tightened down fully just yet until I'm ready to make my final adjustments. Once I sit on the bike, once I feel the sort of geometry and make sure I'm comfortable and I like how everything's laid out, once I get that finalized, at that point, then I'll tighten everything down. But in the meantime, it just needs to be snug enough that I can work on this, get things adjusted, get things aligned, keep it out of the way. But so far, pretty straightforward. This is fairly easy to work on. You just need to take your time. Now here we have the seat. Again, this could probably use some grease. I typically grease my seat posts. However, in this case, just for now, I am going to insert it to get things going. This is pretty straightforward, not a lot to it. Simply that quick release design. You can tighten this down if you need to. This piece here, I feel like that's plastic. That's a little cheap. That could become a liability at some point. That should be aluminum or steel, but I think that threaded piece right there is plastic, so that might be a little bit of a miss. Getting very close to final assembly at this point. Next we have to put on the fender, which this is going to sneak under here. That will fit right up and under. You can see this has a tab. That will bolt into place, and now that I'm looking at it, that's exactly what the loose bolt was. So this is what was in the bottom of the box. And I also need to accommodate the light. So depending on a couple of things. So I believe the fender itself will go on the back side of the fork. And then the light will go on the front side of the fork. But I'm going to test it real quick. Which at this point, this is the only thing you need a screwdriver for. Which is just kind of funny. So a little bit of an odd selection of hardware, but it just is what it is. These stays on the bottom of the fender now at this point hold this in place up onto the sides of the fork. And so I'm going to put these in place first, and that's going to help me figure out the appropriate alignment, which this too also needs the screwdriver, so I guess you do use this in a couple of places, which now you can see that definitely fits very nice, and that does help to hold everything in place. So again, the fender being on the outside, sandwiching the light between the fork. So that's definitely the right way to go. And last but not least here, the pedals. Now, these go on a very specific way. There will be a right hand and left hand side. These are super thin, but they feel nice. They have a nice, I would just say, medium aggressive nub on them, which is going to smash your shins, but not tear them up. You know, I have a pretty bad history of tearing up my shins and my calves with mountain bike pedals, including a couple of pretty bad accidents where I would literally have meat hanging out of the backs of my legs, but that's what happens when you ride hard. So anyway, these don't seem to be marked. There is going to be a very specific way that these go on. They are marked in the corner here. So this one says right. So you can see down in the corner that does say right. So the right hand side. Very simple, nothing to it. And there we go. So with that, this is pretty much fully assembled and ready to go. With the one exception being, I still need to get everything adjusted. So, pretty good shape at this point. You know, nothing's fully torqued down just yet, so I don't want to go riding off. But I can start to feel this thing out. Which I am 6'1", 175 pounds. You can see here, this is a fairly tall bar. So I would say this bike is on the large side, so towards a size large. Right away, I can feel there's a pretty substantial wobble in the bars, which looking here, this says this has been firmly secured from the factory, yet that's where it's wobbling from. So unfortunately, right away, you can see these bars are just moving all over the place, and this has an adjustment to allow you to raise and lower the bars, which regardless, I mean, I don't necessarily need that feature, but that leaves me in a very susceptible and just uncomfortable position with this, where as a mountain biker, I don't like things that are loose and move. So that's not really going to work. So I'm going to take this apart and see what's going on here. And so I definitely feel better about this. If you look at the underside, there's also not just the torqued bolt on the side, but the underside, and that was loose. And once I firmly tightened that up, the bars stiffened up as well. So no more movement. So keep that in mind, that there is another bolt on the underside of the stem. But now as we bring this to life, this does come with 2 keys. Now as we take a look at the battery, this is your on-off switch. Right at the beginning, I said, I feel like there's a bit of a liability. So can I turn this on and then remove the key? The answer is no. So on a mountain bike where I'm riding and I could slide my knee forward, this is crazy to me. I'm literally going to bang into this the entire time. I guarantee you, I rip this key out of here entirely and snap it off, and this gets stuck in the on position. Hopefully it's in the on position when it happens. That seems crazy. That can't be what's intended here. That's nuts. It doesn't come out. That's not a good design at all. So now trying to bring the computer to life, on the bottom of the controls there's a button. Single pressing does nothing, but long pressing you can see it says error, coming around, and here you go. Probably 3 out of 4 or 3 out of 5 bars on the battery. Here's your pedal assist, so mode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can tell you right away, these controls are very plasticky and kind of cheap feeling, which I don't like. A lot of plastic on this bike, which really is keeping the cost down, but I'd pay more for something that's quality versus all this plastic stuff. This is going to be busted, I can tell you that for sure. The grips seem fairly sound. They're nicely sort of bolted into place. And the bars, I feel like this whole thing I need to twist just a little bit, but I can get away with this for now. You can see as I pull the lever, it's telling you that you're braking, both front and rear, so that's interesting. The lights are on, so as I press the light in the front, high beams, That's cool. Little cheap horn. Trip odometer, max speed, average speed. Your full odometer, 0.1 miles. So this has apparently been ridden a little bit. Oh, here you have your brightness. So screen brightness all the way up and then down. So pretty simple. Long pressing the minus. Oop, it started sending me moving. So that's going to be a crawling mode. So if you need to walk the bike, clearly that's a crawling mode. So that'll help you walk. So as we work our way through the bike, we'll go from the rear to the front. And we'll cover all of the features. So here you have your 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires. Now, I believe, and if you take a look here, yep, these definitely have tubes. So they're not a tubeless design, nor would I expect them to be on a bike of this nature. But generally speaking, a lot of companies get this wrong. I believe this rear tire should probably be turned around for maximum traction. A lot of companies are putting these on, and they're really, I mean, I don't know. You could call these a unidirectional tread, but usually on the back you're going to put these knobbies kind of facing in reverse to aid in overall traction, but that's not really the case. I don't know, maybe that's not the trend anymore, but it certainly was when I was a kid and growing up on mountain bikes. But regardless, your 4-inch fat tire, you can see this flare over the top. So the fender flares on this bike are plastic, for better or for worse. I think there's a pro there, which is a lot of times the metal ones buzz and they make a lot of noise, but that's going to be quiet. But the con is plastic is plastic. It can crack, it can fail, but I think these will be okay. Seems like it. Matte black, which is kind of nice. Has a little bit of a reflector on the back. So no tail light on this model, but it does have the reflector. Going down to our 1000 watt peak, and you can see, fairly large hub. So the rear drive motor in the hub, I believe, I mean, at least I would think so, from what I can tell. But then again, we move forward, and here we are, we're talking about a mid-drive. So this was not in their advertisements. I think this has both a mid-drive and a rear hub drive, which could give this a real nice, torquey and fast, zippy ride. So I'll be very curious to see how that goes. 6-speed drivetrain. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. So 6-speed drivetrain. What's that? Shimano Tourney. Sort of lower level Shimano, which is whatever. I would prefer nicer components, of course, but at the same time, for this entry level, can't be too beat up over that. Going into your front sprockets, usually these end up with a guide ring. That's certainly not a bash ring, although I'll probably go bashing this off of some rocks and stumps. It's very thin, so you're going to need to be careful. You can see the crank arms into these pedals. Again, reasonable pedals, but they're fairly thin. You do end up with some threaded stays for, if you choose to put a luggage rack or something like that on here. You can also add it here. You can also add bike trailers to these. So they do offer, Nakto does offer trailers, which is kind of cool. Going into your seat post and your seat, this does have a little bit of suspension under there, so just going to cushion your ride a little bit. That's kind of nice. Your top bar, again, you can see as it swoops up, buys you a little bit of clearance, but it's still fairly tall. It looks to be undersized for the size of this bike, but I don't think that'll matter. It has good shape, and that'll at least reduce the overall weight. I wouldn't want anything too much thicker than this anyway. 48 volt, 16 amp battery. So fairly nice sized battery. And Nakto does report that they believe this should have a range of roughly around 60 miles. I've tested e-bikes in the past. That would really require you to pedal the entire time. And I'm kind of like a throttle hog, so I'll be e-biking this thing all the way. So I'll probably get like 15 miles if I'm lucky. Now they say you should get around 28 miles per hour. That'll be interesting to see how this performs. But again, I am really intrigued at the combination if this is a mid-drive and rear drive all together. But regardless, one of the weaknesses I always find on these e-bikes, the forks. They're not usually very good, at least in terms of the models that I've tested. I'm hoping we don't have any problems here. We're going to keep an eye on this. You can see nice clean stanchions, so I will be watching this over time to see how that performs. Hopefully we don't end up with any issues. You can see on the underside of the frame, that looks to be the ability to add some water bottle holders, potentially. I'm not positive, but it kind of looks like it maybe to me. Could also be part of the battery system. I'm not entirely sure, but that's something that I could certainly test in the future. Oversized welds and gusseted, nice and beefy on the front end. You can see everything coming together down into that front rim. So again, 26 inches. 4-inch tires, the fat tires, going down into our rotors, so 160 millimeter rotors into mechanical disc brakes. So that's another place where other manufacturers or higher end bikes will use the hydraulic disc brakes. This is mechanical, so it leverages a cable. The spindle on the front, again, you know, some companies will go with a real thick bolted axle. This is more your thinner, quick release style. Not a big deal. That should be more than strong enough. As you take a look down at the rim, you can see big heavy weld right there. Hopefully we don't see any issues in the future. I don't think that'll be a problem, but just caught my eye and happened to notice that. But the fender going over the top, again, this is plastic. Nice, big, large light. Should throw a good amount of light. We'll test that in the darkness. And just talking about the forks real quick, I do already see that you have travel and dampening adjustments, so that will be interesting to see how they perform. Coming up through the bars, reasonable brake levers, but again, these are mechanical, so they're only going to be so good. They are plastic, I believe. I'm trying to tell. I think these might be plastic. No, they're probably just aluminum. Yeah, I believe these are painted aluminum, so that's good. These handle grips are okay. They're rubber and they go to, double bolted design. So that's nice. Hopefully they don't slide on me. They don't feel like they will. And they're bolted nicely into place. Down into your controls. So your lighting and horn controls. That's a plastic collar there. So again, you just need to be a little bit careful. If you were going to take a hard wreck, some of the stuff could really take damage. So you definitely want to be careful. And this really kind of has me bummed out. It's just a little bit light, a little bit thin. I'm hoping that everything here will work out okay. Down into your stem, so an adjustable stem for height. So you can see if you wanted to, you could certainly lower these down. Again, I do need to twist my bars forward just a bit. I feel like, I kind of got to get on the front here, loosen that up, and then just twist everything more forwards. That will aid in my ability to get on the the grips better and, not have my hands rock too far back. But, it's close. It might not be too bad. Going into our 6-speed Shimano shifter. Again, this is, fairly cheap Shimano, sort of low entry-level tourney stuff. But, again, you can see here, you end up with your lever. That's going to be just fine. Thumb controls. And then here, this is your throttle. So that's going to be nice. That push button throttle. I love that it's right hand controls. That to me is definitely advantageous, and I very much prefer right hand controls versus left. So I am very glad to see that. But all in all, a pretty good looking bike. I do have to say, I like the way this looks. I like the matte black with the white accents and then that nice bright logo. Pretty cool. It's a neat looking bike. I will definitely be interested to see how this performs. So the next thing for me, I just have to get out and ride. So at this point, that wraps up the introduction, the unboxing, and the overview. Shows you generally what you're getting into with this Nakto F6. Now, I am, again, very intrigued at how this will perform. The fact that I think it has both the mid-drive and rear hub could be really, really cool. A hardtail design should be fairly quick. I'm hoping this thing's going to perform with that 1,000 watt peak rear hub. So again, much more to come. And then durability wise, well, I'm probably not really going to gauge that entirely with this video, simply from the standpoint that my riding footage will be limited to what I capture, and it's not going to be indicative of the long-term ownership experience. However, if something were to fail or break or loosen up, I will at least know that. So the riding footage, I think, is going to tell us a lot about the overall quality and performance of this bike. But again, thank you guys for following along. Thank you to Nakto for providing this full review. Much more to come in the future. And if you like this video, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless 2 channel, which is more on the tactical and firearm side of things. At this point, the channel is growing quickly. I have a ton of videos up there. So if you like what you see here on Outer Limitless, do me a favor and check me out on Outer Limitless 2. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.